The first lie was small, almost forgettable. Mark had said he was flying to Chicago for a conference, but when Emily found an old itinerary in his office drawer, it listed Miami. She almost laughed it off, maybe a last-minute change. It wasn't until the little inconsistencies piled up that the uneasy feeling in her stomach became impossible to ignore. His business trips had become more frequent. His phone was always on silent, face down, on the table. He used to call her every night when he was away. Now, she barely got a text. "Work is crazy," he'd say with a tired smile. "You know how it is." But she didn't know, because Mark wasn't acting like the man she married. One night, as he showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Emily wasn't the snooping type, but something about the way he had been guarding his phone lately made her hesitate. She glanced toward the bathroom. The water was still running. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the phone. A single, unread message lit up the screen. "I can't wait to see you again, counting down the days." Emily's breath hitched. Her vision blurred as 1,000 thoughts crashed into her mind at once. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Had she really been so blind? The shower turned off. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to think fast. She placed the phone exactly where it had been, then grabbed a book from the nightstand, pretending to read. Mark stepped out of the bathroom, towel slung around his waist. He gave her a lazy smile. "What are you still doing up?" Emily forced her lips into a smile, her pulse hammering. Couldn't sleep. He climbed into bed beside her, oblivious. When he rolled over, his back to her, she lay there, staring at the ceiling. The evidence was right in front of her. Confront him now? No. Too soon. She needed to be sure. Mark was hiding something, and she was going to find out exactly what it was. Emily became an investigator in her own home. She started with his credit card statements, restaurants in cities he wasn't supposed to be in, charges for luxury hotels that didn't match the company budget, his Chicago trip last month, a $200 dinner in Miami, a boutique jewelry store purchase when he never bought her jewelry. Every clue tightened the knot in her stomach. Then came the final test. Mark announced another business trip, this time to Dallas. Emily nodded, kissed him goodbye, and watched as he tossed his suitcase into the back of his car. She waited exactly 5 minutes before grabbing her keys and following. Her heart pounded as she trailed him through traffic, staying just far enough behind. But Mark didn't drive to the airport. Instead, he took the highway out of town. Emily gripped the steering wheel, her breath shallow. Where was he going? After nearly an hour, Mark pulled into a small, secluded hotel off the main road. Not a corporate hotel, not a place for business. A place for secrets. Emily parked a safe distance away, her hands trembling as she watched him step out of the car, glance around and check in at the front desk. For a few agonizing minutes, nothing happened. Then she saw her. A woman stepped out of a sleek black car, her heels clicking against the pavement. Tall, elegant, effortlessly put together, she walked straight into the hotel lobby, as if she had done this 100 times before. Emily held her breath, willing herself to be wrong. Then, through the glass doors, she saw it. Mark, greeting the woman with an all too familiar smile, his hands resting on her waist, their lips meeting in a slow, intimate kiss. Emily felt the ground shift beneath her. Her stomach twisted, her fingers digging into her seatbelt. The air felt too thick, too suffocating. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was real. Her husband wasn't away on business. He was here, with her. Emily clenched her jaw, swallowing the sob threatening to escape. She had her answer. But now, she had to decide what to do with it. Emily gripped her phone, knuckles white, as she zoomed in and snapped the first picture. Then, another, and another. Mark and the woman disappeared into the hotel, their bodies close, their laughter drifting through the air like a slap to her face. Every part of her wanted to storm in, scream, demand answers, but she forced herself to stay put. She needed proof. She stepped out of her car, keeping her hood up, and made her way closer. The lobby's large windows gave her the perfect view. Mark and the woman stood at the front desk, checking in. He looked over his shoulder twice. Nervous, anxious, not the confident, cheating husband she had expected. Emily moved carefully, slipping inside just as they headed down the hall. She hung back watching as Mark unlocked a room. The woman touched his arm, whispered something in his ear. He hesitated just for a second before following her inside. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. She had seen enough. She turned to leave, but then the voice? The woman's voice. Familiar. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. She turned her head slightly, listening through the door. A soft giggle, a muffled conversation. Her mind raced. Where had she heard that voice before? Then, like a cold blade slicing through her memory, it hit her. It was Claire, her best friend. The air left her lungs in a sharp gasp. Her legs wobbled, and she had to grip the wall to stay upright. This wasn't just an affair. This was betrayal. The realization sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. Claire, her confidante, her shoulder to cry on, the woman who had comforted her on nights when Mark was away, the same Claire who had sworn Mark was lucky to have her. A sickening thought crawled into her mind. How long, how many times had Claire sat across from her, nodding sympathetically while secretly being with her husband? Emily clenched her teeth, swallowing the scream bubbling in her throat, but through the haze of fury, she saw something else. Mark was pacing inside the room, running a hand through his hair, checking his phone, muttering something. He was worried. This wasn't just an affair, he was hiding something bigger. And now, Emily had to find out exactly what it was. Emily's hands trembled as she scrolled through Claire's social media. She had ignored her posts for weeks, too disgusted to look, but now she was searching for something specific. And then she found it. Claire, dressed in designer clothes, standing next to a sleek black car, a caption that made Emily's stomach twist. Business is booming. Nothing beats making money with the right people. She clicked the comments. The same men kept appearing under her posts: smooth, expensive suits, cryptic messages, and Mark had liked every single one. Emily's mind raced. This wasn't just an affair. This was something else. She went further, searching Mark's email. He had never been good with passwords. It didn't take long before she was inside. And that's when she saw it. Dozens of messages, invoices, transactions under fake business names, deposits into secret accounts. Her throat went dry. Money laundering? Mark wasn't just cheating. He was involved in something illegal. And Claire? She was right in the middle of it. Emily's pulse pounded. If she confronted him now, he'd lie. Worse, he might realize she knew too much. She had to be smart. Her options raced through her head. 1. Expose him. Turn the evidence over to the police and let them handle it. But what if it put her in danger? 2. Escape, pack her bags, take the evidence, and leave before he found out. But that meant running while he got away with everything. 3. Set a trap. Make him believe she was still oblivious, and gather enough proof to destroy him. Emily took a slow breath, her decision forming. She wasn't just going to leave, she was going to take him down. That night, she wiped her history, cleared her tracks, and smiled at Mark when he came home. She pretended nothing had changed. But in the background, she was making calls to a lawyer, to a detective. And soon, Mark was going to realize that the real business trip had just begun. Emily sat across from Mark at the dinner table, twirling her wine glass between her fingers. He was distracted, scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging her presence. Perfect. She had spent weeks playing the clueless wife, watching, gathering, waiting. Every bank statement, every shady transaction, every meeting with Clarit was all documented. She had spoken to a lawyer, handed over evidence to a private investigator, and even met with law enforcement. Now, all she had to do was light the match. She cleared her throat. So, how was Dallas? Mark barely looked up. Same as always. Low meetings, you know how it is? Emily smiled. I do. She slid a small envelope across the table. Mark frowned, setting his phone down. What's this? Open it? He hesitated before pulling out the stack of photos, him and Claire at the hotel. Bank records, a printed email confirming a wire transfer under a fake company name. His face paled. I wonder what your company would think if they saw these, Emily mused, tilting her head. Or the police. Mark's jaw clenched. Emily, this isn't. She held up a hand. Don't lie, Mark. We're past that. For the first time, he looked afraid. She leaned in. I've already spoken to the authorities. Your accounts are flagged. Claire's, too. They'll be knocking on your door soon. His hands tightened into fists. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. Her voice was ice. You betrayed me. You used me. And now, you're going to pay for it? Mark's breath quickened. Emily, please. If we'd just... I already filed for divorce. She stood, grabbing her purse, and I made sure you won't get a cent. Mark shot up. You can't just walk away. Emily smirked. Watch me. She turned her back on him, just like he had done to her so many times before. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin. She inhaled deeply, a weight lifting off her shoulders. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. She may have lost a husband, but she had gained something far more valuable. Her freedom